Ever get that, like, weird feeling when you accomplish something big, but telling people about it feels, I don't know, almost wrong?
Oh, totally. Like bragging about it just wouldn't sit right.
Yeah. And J.D. Vance, the Hillbilly Elegy guy, he nails this. Went to Yale Law School, the whole shebang.
Prestige, right?
Big time. But he felt super awkward telling people, like really uncomfortable.
Which honestly is kind of wild when you think about it.
Totally. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. That feeling, that experience, especially for folks like Vance coming from, white working class Appalachia.
Right, because it's not just about individual success then,
It's about culture clash.
Yeah.
Like leaping between two different worlds.
Yeah, exactly. So full disclosure, we're not doing a book report here, right? We're cherry picking the most insightful bits. And Hillbilly Elegy, it ain't some stuffy textbook. Vance kicks things off with his own family saga.
Oh yeah, his grandparents. They pieced out of poverty in Kentucky, headed north, Middletown, Ohio, chasing those factory jobs. Armco Steel, ring a bell.
Huge back then. And they weren't alone. Vance talks about this mass exodus from Appalachia, folks desperate for a piece of that American dream.
Exactly. In Armco, they were all about it, encouraged workers to bring their families, build a whole life up there.
So you didn't just get individuals migrating, you got entire communities uprooted, plopped right into the industrial Midwest. Vance argues that shift, it reverberates even today.
Fascinating stuff. But, and there's always a but, right? This is where that too big for your britches thing creeps in.
Oh yeah, that feeling you've somehow betrayed where you came from.
Vance's grandparents, they had more money, sure, but they always felt that pull back to Kentucky, like they'd overstepped by leaving.
Right.
Did you ever feel that pressure, even when you're trying to, better yourself?
It's so relatable though, right? That tension between ambition and belonging. Vance talks about how his grandparents, they lived in this community of other Appalachian transplants,
Trying to fit in.
but never quite assimilating. Even little things. They hated domesticated animals, like really hated them. Paints a picture, doesn't it?
Deeply ingrained, right? Like some part of them never really left those Kentucky hills.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just them. This chaos, it trickled down to Vance's own parents.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
Drinking, unstable relationships, violence.
Yeah.
It wasn't just being poor. It was...
Unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly. And Vance, he actually talks about this game he played with his sister Lindsay, with their dad.
A game?
Well, not really. See, if a dad parked the car normally, it meant he was sober. Good night.
Oh, God.
But if he crashed it, or even just parked, like, really badly...
The signal. Right.
meant he was drunk, and they had to, brace himself. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Being a kid, and then instead of, like, playing tag, you're analyzing parking jobs for signs of danger.
Heavy stuff.
And the saddest part, this cycle, it keeps going. Lindsay, she marries young, trying to escape that environment, right?
Sure.
Only to end up with some guy who's abusive. It's like, the more things change.
The more they stay the same. And it makes you wonder, how much of this is generational trauma holding people back?
Right. Vance, he's really open about the physical toll, too. Childhood obesity, constant stomach aches, pure stress. Makes you think, how many people are carrying that around? And how does it affect their shot at a better life?
Big questions, for sure.
But here's the thing. Vance, he doesn't crack under pressure. He says it was two people, his mama and papa, who showed him what it meant to be resilient.
The grandparents.
Yeah, they weren't saints or anything. They had their own baggage. But their love, it was tough. Strong work ethic, and they were always there for him. Always.
That unconditional support can make all the difference.
Totally. And Mama, she's a force of nature. Tough love, but also this fierce belief in Vance's potential. That classic, I'm going to push you because I know you're capable kind of love.
He needed that.
Oh, desperately. And she's full of these contradictions, too. Like, she's scraping by, right?
Yeah.
But she buys him this expensive graphing calculator because education was his ticket out. But then she also teaches him how to fight, how to protect himself. Because that's the world they lived in. It's this weird mix of nurturing his mind, but also acknowledging that sometimes you gotta fight back.
It's complicated. And that's what makes Hillbilly Elegy so powerful. It's not offering some simple solution or pretending these communities are easy to understand. It's real. Messy, contradictory, but real. And that's the voice, that belief. It's in his head when Vance gets to Ohio State. College.
Huge deal.
Right. But imagine, he's excited, but there's this weight, too. Like, he's carrying his family's hopes, his whole community's right on his back.
It's more than just doing well in class. It's
Proof that someone from their world could make it.
and not let the opportunity slip away.
Which, by the way, so many folks back in Middletown, they never even got close, right?
Exactly. And it's not just abstract pressure for Vance either. He's still dealing with, like, the emotional scars, you know? Losing Mama, that hit him hard.
She was the rock.
And he talks about feeling lost, alone. Like, even with this amazing chance in front of it, part of him is still that scared kid.
Makes sense, though. Trauma doesn't just disappear.
For sure. So what's a guy to do? How do you prove, not just to everyone else, but to yourself, that you're breaking free? Vance, he makes a decision. A big one.
Let me guess. Grad school applications.
Even bolder, he joins the Marines.
Whoa! Okay, didn't see that coming. But when you think about it...
Makes total sense.
Structure, purpose...
That's part of it.
Yeah.
But deeper. Right. It's Vance taking on that learned helplessness head on. Like shouting, I am not just a product of my environment. I could choose something different.
Powerful. So boot camp, they break him down, build him back up.
Not just about saluting and shining boots either. They drill this idea of learned willfulness into him.
Which is...
This radical idea that you're not along for the ride, you're driving. Even when life throws crap at you, you can steer.
And he loses, what, like 45 pounds? The physical transformation is huge, but it's that inner shift, right?
Totally. He goes back to Middletown, people barely recognize him.
New haircut.
Ha! Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's like he finally sees himself, not the chaos of his childhood. And that confidence, it changes everything. Ohio State becomes less about escaping and more about
building.
Building, exactly.
Okay, but Yale Law School, that's a whole different view.
Whole different world.
He talks about cleaning up after classmates at a chicken joint. Him and his friend Jamil, they're looking around like, are we the only ones who've ever worked a real job?
That feeling, though, like you snuck into a party you weren't invited to. Any second, someone's gonna kick you out.
Big time. So, yeah, no wonder he clams up about Yale. It's like he's living in two worlds at once and they don't quite connect.
And that's the crazy thing about upward mobility, right?
Yeah.
You achieve this amazing thing.
But it can leave you feeling more lost than ever. And he's honest about the struggle. He even talks about these, like, two Middletowns, the haves and the have-nots, right?
Living side by side.
Sometimes in the same family.
Wild, right? Yeah. Like he's saying, yeah, you can climb out of poverty, but it never really leaves you.
The echoes are always there. And he's not afraid to talk about the tough stuff either. Like, he talks about this culture of learned helplessness.
Meaning?
It's this idea that people get, I don't know, stuck. Like they believe they're powerless to change anything. Ever feel that? Like, no matter how hard you try, it's not going to make a difference.
Oh, for sure. That feeling of, like, swimming upstream, you just get tired. But Vance, he's like, wait a minute. What if we do have more power than we think?
He's not saying the obstacles aren't real. It's more like, don't underestimate yourself.
Exactly.
And look, his whole story proves it's possible. Kid from chaos gets into Yale Law, right?
Right. Oh.
But you UT. And it's a big but. He's the first to admit luck played a part. Mama and Papa, the Marines, even just ending up AT Yale.
Not everyone gets those chances.
Exactly.
So how do you balance that, pushing personal responsibility, but also acknowledging that the system is, you know, kind of rigged? What would Vance do?
Well, buckle up, because he's big on tough love. Investing in opportunity, yes, but not just handouts.
What does that even look like?
Think early childhood education, job training that actually leads somewhere, building up communities from within.
Giving people the tools to help themselves.
A hand up, not a handout.
Okay.
Makes sense. But then he gets to welfare, and whoo boy.
Here we go.
He doesn't hold back. He's like, look, we need a safety net, right? BUT. The current system, it traps people.
Keeps them dependent.
He wants to see welfare redesigned to encourage work, not discourage it.
Definitely a hot take.
For sure. But he's not coming from a mean place, you know?
Yep.
He's seen how even good intentions can backfire.
Right, it's complicated.
And one of his big points is welfare can actually make poverty worse. You get these communities isolated, lacking resources. It just reinforces the cycle.
So it's not enough to just throw money at the problem, you have to change the system.
Exactly. He talks about things like mixed income housing, break up those concentrations of poverty so people are exposed to different ways of living, different possibilities.
It's like changing the story they tell themselves about what's possible.
And that's huge. But it's not just about economics, right? He's calling for a cultural shift, too.
In what way?
Well, he's not a fan of entitlement, that whole I deserve this without putting in the work.
Right.
He wants to see a return to hard work, personal responsibility, community over me first, all the time.
Which some people might hear that and think, okay, Grandpa, let's get you back to bed. But it's deeper than that. He's talking about those core values.
The things that give life meaning, belonging, contributing to something bigger than yourself. And remember, he's coming from a place where family, church, community, that was the safety net.
So how does this all fit into the whole political landscape?
Well, that's what's so interesting about Vance. He doesn't fit neatly into any box. Yeah, he's conservative, but he calls out BS on both sides.
How so?
He says liberals, they can be too quick to dismiss personal responsibility. And conservatives, they often focus on policies that help the wealthy while ignoring the people struggling just to get by.
So he's like, can we just skip the labels and talk about real solutions?
Exactly. He wants honest, even uncomfortable conversations about how we actually create a fair society.
So Hillbilly Elegy, it's more than just a memoir. It's
A wake-up call. It's Vance saying, hey, America, this is us. Let's deal with it.
He's not giving us all the answers, but he's starting the conversation.
And that's where it begins, right? With listening, understanding.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Hillbilly Elegy. We've covered a lot. Upward mobility, generational trauma, that feeling of being caught between two worlds. But more importantly, we've been challenged to think differently, to look beyond our own experiences and see the human side of these issues.
Because behind every statistic, every policy debate, there's a real person with their own story.
And those stories, they deserve to be heard. So our challenge to you, pick up a copy of Hillbilly Elegy and see what resonates with you. Wrestle with it, because in understanding Vance's journey, we might just learn a little something about ourselves. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep diving deep.